Yeah. Welcome back, everyone, and sorry for we're taking a bit of time to sort our sitting order. But yeah, I just wanted to say first a big thank you to Frieder and of course Paul and Dan for the first session, which was amazing, and to Nick, who unfortunately had to go, for chairing it. And just very, very briefly, I just wanted to say that this is for the rest of the day. We're going to have two panels. For the first one, Where to Now, the Digital Revolution, is where we're just going to. I've got four great people and colleagues with me here today, and Jim Bolton, Nika McDonald, Maria Hadjichristodoulou, and Alex May. And I'll just invite them just to say a few words, to share some ideas about the memories, about preservation, about how the different generations of creative practitioners are coming together, and maybe talk a little bit about the past, the present, and maybe reflect a bit on the future. Also, I just wanted, before we start, I wanted to say that at the end of the second panel, we will have the drinks outside and the preview of our Brown & Son Art That Makes Itself catalog. So you're very welcome to join us for that. And I just wanted to maybe start with inviting Jim to say a few words and share some of his work with us.
I'm a digital archaeologist, at least half the time. The rest of the time I'm a digital marketing guy. And what I do is I identify and I dig up lost and forgotten code, and then I restore it to its former glory and exhibit on the hardware and the software of the time. My first digital experience, maybe Hungry Horace. I got a ZX Spectrum for Christmas in 1982. And had to be dragged down for my Christmas dinner. But I suppose 1995 was the year that I got involved in digital professionally. And in 1995, I was working at possibly the most analog place in the world, the British Post Office. And my job was to look into the issue of motor vehicle licenses, the tax disc, and see how they could be processed and issued more efficiently. And I had a brilliant idea of making them square and issuing them like stamps, because the post office is pretty good at issuing stamps. But the idea got laughed out of court. Basically, the response was, all the tax disc holders are round, and you can't have a square disc. So I kind of realised that my time with the post office was coming to an end, and I had to look elsewhere. And it was 1995. Microsoft Explorer had just come out, and this is what the post office website looked like at the time. And the frame set and the animated GIF just told me that this was the future. So 18 months later, I found myself at the Hypermedia Research Centre at the University of Westminster. And when I went along to the interview, it was run by Dr. Richard Barbrook, Jeremy Quinn, and the Arts Collective Anti-Rom. And when I went along to the interview, I said to Richard, what's the difference between multimedia and hypermedia? And Richard said, multimedia is computer science, hypermedia is rock and roll. So I signed up on the spot, and that brings me to my first suggestion about what next for the digital revolution. And that's the next phase of the digital revolution will not be determined by computer scientists. And actually, when I was at the HRC, this is some of the work that I was exposed to. You can see Noodlebox on there, and there's brilliant work by Olia Leolina and Jody and Word.com, etc. And what was incredible about a lot of this work is it wasn't made by programmers. It was made by illustrators, it was made by artists, and it was made by designers and writers. After leaving the course, I set up a company with a friend of mine on the course called Lars. We called it Large for Lars and Jim. And we came up with a fantastic strapline, Your Life Stinks. For some reason we thought that would be a good idea. We were young. We were young and inexperienced, but yet we still managed to win some work. We won some global work for brands like Bang & Olufsen and Guinness and Asian Provocateur. And we really had no right to win that work. But I think in a period of accelerating change that we were in and we are in, I think nobody's experienced. We're all making it up. as we go along. And I think the ability not to be constrained by previous paradigms is actually a good thing. And so my second prediction for the future is if you don't know the rules, it's easier to break them. And just listening to the talks earlier, I was wondering if the point at which computers start to break the rules is the point at which they can truly become creative and a bit scary. So in 2002, I went to Game On, which was a history of video games at the Barbican. What was brilliant about it was actually you could play the games in the context that they were made for on the original hardware. And I thought somebody should do this for websites. And 8 years later, nobody had done it for websites, so I decided to do it myself. And what the insight I had then was actually it wasn't that difficult to get hold of the hardware. It wasn't actually that difficult to downgrade the operating systems, get the right browsers in the period, and install the plugins. It was a bit tricky, but it was doable. What actually was tricky was getting people to give you the code, either because they hadn't kept it, they'd lost it, or it was on redundant or obsolete media. So if the past is a reflection of the future, the next phase of the digital revolution won't be archived either. I think Alex might be talking a little bit about this soon, and I mentioned it in my essay in the catalogue. So off the back of that exhibition, I got asked to get involved with the Digital Revolution exhibition at the Barbican last summer. My role was to look at the historical part of the digital revolution and come up with 100 projects that told the creative history of computers. Two of those projects were Noodlebox and Builder Eater, hence the fact that I'm standing here. We decided to start in 1970, even though we're aware a lot of the pioneering work was done before then, because that was the era, that was the decade that it became truly kind of a mass media, and the general public were touched by digital. The first exhibit in the exhibition is John Conway's Game of Life. And I think what's great about this particular piece was, firstly, it came out in a magazine. It came out in printed format first and foremost in the Scientific American in 1970. And I think there's a nice little quote in there where John Conway is saying that you need a large paper grid and some two-sided counters. He doesn't mention computers. But the fact that I think you start off with a configuration that then it matures and evolves in unpredictable and magical ways is actually another good metaphor for the digital revolution. So the next phase, I think, will evolve in unpredictable and magical ways. Another exhibit was the first bit of CGI. This is a scene from Michael Crichton's Westworld. Yul Brynner's robot vision was actually put together by John Whitney Jr. The job was actually offered to his dad first, but his dad said that there wasn't enough time and not enough budget. So the son stepped in. So I think there's another lesson there. There's always someone younger and cheaper prepared to step in and do your job. Another exhibit was Space Invaders, and I think Space Invaders is obviously a classic. And what's brilliant about it is it's the first game with a high score table. It's the first game with multiple lives. It's the first game with a continuous soundtrack. But it's actually all done by one bloke. Tomohiro Nishikado actually designed it, programmed it, built the hardware, wrote the soundtrack, and even designed the artwork for the cabinet. It was a one-man job. So I think that's interesting. He's a multidisciplinary individual. And I think we've moved to a situation where we've got these huge teams of people, and they're all kind of specialists in different areas. But I think we're slowly moving back to the point where it's important to be multidisciplined. So I think the next phase of the digital revolution will be conducted by multidisciplinary individuals. Another exhibit in the show was the Apple Mac, and represented by this woodblock lady combing hair by Susan Kerr. And this is just a bit of an aside, really. When I was chatting to Susan about being in the show, she said, sure, I'd love to, but then she referred to my web exhibition, which I was amazed that she'd actually heard of. And she said, I'm surprised to see you're already using my paint can as part of your branding for your previous show. At which point I went into a massive panic mode and I hugely apologised. I think it was such a part of kind of our lives that didn't actually stop and think that actually someone owned the IP. But rather than suing me, she actually created me an icon for my exhibition, which I thought was a hugely, and That's a torch, by the way, not a rocket. Right, and which I think was a hugely generous act, and I kind of owe her one forever. So my seventh suggestion is that if you don't underestimate the power of generosity, and that might be a bit kind of hopeful, but I think in an increasingly digital world, and where we move to a kind of more and more of a perfect market, I think differentiators like generosity might actually make the difference. One of my favourite pieces in the show was Jodi.org, and I'm sure most of you know the piece, but what they did was invert the relationship between the page and the source code. The page itself looked like a load of gobbledygook, it looked like the browser had crashed. But when you examine the source code, you actually saw the plans for an atomic bomb, and actually by inverting that relationship, they make you realise that there's a layer beneath the presentation, and they're actually everything you see on the screen is a manipulation. I think it's good to be reminded of that, and I think we're going to get to a point when everything is digital. We're either going to be programmers or we're going to be programmed. So program or be programmed is my eighth peek around the corner. Dancing Baby. This was the first of a number of viral phenomena that appeared on the web. I think we had dancing hamsters, dancing elves, and a dancing middle-aged Korean pop star. So my next prediction is that whatever it is, it will probably involve dancing. And that might sound kind of a little bit of a trivial point, but actually I think live performance is actually one of the areas that digital hasn't totally impregnated. The last exhibit in the show was Angry Birds. And we decided that the point at which billions of people started carrying around a supercomputer in their pocket and using it to throw Angry Birds at bad piggies was the point at which digital culture had just become digital. So actually I think for the next phase of the digital revolution, whatever it is, we won't call it digital. That's it from me. It's perfect on the 10-minute mark. And there's the 10 commandments, or the 10 suggestions for the next phase of the digital revolution.
For the first time in ages, or maybe ever, I haven't got any visual aids such as PowerPoints or slides. And that's because I didn't want to have illustrative kind of imagery rather than generative. And so I respond in text to where to now with digital revolution. So it's widely accepted that the digital revolution, also known as the Third Industrial Revolution, marked the beginning of the information age. The term revolution in itself signifies a dramatic and wide-reaching change in conditions, attitudes, or operations. That's a definition of one of the definitions in English Oxford Dictionary. The digital revolution indeed brought forward dramatic change in areas such as communication, commerce, mobility, and access, with far-reaching social and economic consequences. So all that is a given. Nevertheless, already as far back as in 1969, McLuhan suggested, in response to critics resisting or inadequately responding to the notion of innovation, the revolution has already taken place. And so it had. Within our own post-media condition, new media is old news. And the art practices that engage with it, such as new media art, an art form unfortunately defined by its newness, is now old. Though old, new media art was never fully embraced within the contemporary art scene. And Berit Graham and Sarah Cook have argued that new media art has been briefly taken up as a novelty and shown only for its newness. The hype surrounding the technology driving new media art hasn't helped its long-term engagement with the art world, unquote. And I would agree. So what I suggest we need is a digital detox of sorts, not in the sense of a shift away from technology, which we cannot do and would be foolish to believe we can, but as a shift away from the focus on the new and newness, and a turn back towards the past, the old. To put it succinctly, back is the new black. And Simon Reynolds probably agree in his book Retromania that came out a few years ago. As digital technologies become ever more dominant in our daily lives, facilitating and complicating them in equal measure, there is an increasing trend to look back to technologies of the past with some nostalgia. I like the word nostalgia because it's Greek, and I'm Greek. It means nostos, return home, and algos, meaning pain, and denotes the yearning to return to an experience of place or community that has been lost. It is a homesickness of sorts. It suggests, to quote Pinch and Reinecke, an attempt by actors in the present to return to a comfortable and ideal setting. And of course, there is no comfortable and ideal setting to return to. Nevertheless, that's what we might imagine the past as. Recently, techno-nostalgia is being expressed through looking back at analog technologies as objects and processes of desire through what the same authors describe as excursions into vintage year. This nostalgic return is bound by horizons of melancholy, sentiment, menace, and emotion, and carries strong affective potential. Brown and Son, purveyors of digital images, consciously, as I understand, and from their presentation, call for a neo-nostalgia of sorts that does not stop at reminiscence, but engages with history and art history and heritage. Pointing at the phenomenon of erasure of memory in recent blockbuster shows, and I would also add funding initiatives, such as the Digital R&D Fund for the Arts, for example, they point towards the oldness rather than the newness of digital arts and computation. Part of their project in this exhibition is to look at digital art as part of historic lineage that often gets forgotten or sidestepped to suit institutions and funders' novelty agendas. I think their move is remarkable and important. For too long, the narrative around new media, computational technology, and the digital has been focused on the new and novelty. But the more we focus on novelty, the next new thing in art and technology, the more our collective memory appears to become shorter and shorter. But novelty is not the same as innovation. Not even invention guarantees innovation. As Benoit Godin eloquently demonstrates in his recent book, Innovation Contested, that came out this year, there has to be use and adoption of the invention for benefits to accrue. So he suggests innovation is not about novelty, and invention by themselves are insufficient to create innovation. And that is how innovation comes to constitute a break with the past through its use and adoption. And as a result of that break with the past, a revolution, to take us back to the title of this panel. So I suggest that what we need to do now is shift our focus from newness to innovation. And innovation not as a novelty and not as uniquely linked to technology or commerce, but innovation as a historic phenomena that signifies continuity with the past, which it sets out to break from. But to break with the past, one needs to be embedded within it and to be fully aware of one's condition as such. We need a new back to the past trend in pursuit of innovation, and Mark Gross has also argued this in Wired a few years back. And it is already happening through digitization of archives, searchable content, and smarter decision-making as a result, so new ways of engaging with the past. But Paul and Dan, Brown and Son, do not just gesture towards history and heritage. They also gesture towards what one might call a vintage entrepreneurial model, and Frida beautifully referred to that. That of a family-run business, which is handed from generation to generation. A quick search online while I was trying to think what I was going to talk about confirmed my suspicion that family-run enterprises of this type are more often than not quality butchers and cheesemakers than technology companies. The exact opposite of startups, in fact. Startups, and we do live within a startup culture, are normally tech companies designed to grow fast, and they chase metrics that kind of crazy, such as 5% growth every week. Family businesses, on the other hand, were and are still designed for slow but steady growth, aiming to serve a small group of loyal customers or a bigger group of loyal customers over a long and sustained period of time. And I'm not arguing that one type of enterprise is better than another. I haven't got an expertise in that area to do that. And indeed, I believe different entrepreneurial models are appropriate to different types of enterprise and as valid and valuable as each other. Nevertheless, at a time when the arts and creative industries are talked about in one breath, and when immense pressure is put upon artists to be self-sustainable financially and monetize art and cultural outputs, I wonder whether the vintage entrepreneurial model Brown and Son are gesturing towards could be more than a metaphor, whether it could in fact indicate the beginning of another back-to-past trend in digital and creative entrepreneurship. And given their success in straddling across fine art and design and craft and industry, and given the current appeal of the slow movement, a cultural shift towards slowing down life space that is manifested through the slow food movement, the slow travel, città slow, the slow cities movement in Italy, I think they might be onto something. Thank you.
Thank you very much both for your initial thoughts. And before we pass on to Alex and Nico's quick presentations, I wonder if there are any kind of immediate questions from anyone that you want to ask to Jim and Maria. Yeah?
One for Maria. I was just, what you were saying made me think of the idea that information isn't understanding. And there's a saturation of information. And if I could tie that to two particular things. One is climate change. There's more information about climate change than ever before. People have more access to it through the internet. And yet there's a lack of an understanding, presumably, otherwise there'd be a response. And also, if you look at the most recent election in Britain, lots of polling reports, lots of information. I think, forget parties, I think most people would just say overall there was a kind of bad outcome in the whole political process. It's not exactly a question, just something you could comment on, perhaps?
Yes, I mean, I don't know what to say other than, yes, I agree. It's, yeah. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we move on? No? Oh yeah, there is one by Brona.
Yeah, I suppose it's to both Jim and to Maria. So it's a rather obvious question, really, but it's should we forego the revolution word and reclaim evolution? Because I think you're both, well, certainly Maria, you were suggesting evolution. And are these terms useful at all at the stage we're at?
I mean, I don't mind the term revolution. I think we all kind of understand that it doesn't actually mean something that's totally revolutionary at the moment. It's a longer period of time, so I'm comfortable with revolution.
I kind of mind the term revolution, and I mind it more because it's been used as a term. I mean, I've been working like you, like many people here in this field, for quite a long time, and the term revolution has been used throughout that period of time without any qualitative difference in terms of what we mean by that and what exactly is it that we're revolting against. So revolution is about change and wide-ranging change, but also it's about revolting against something. And I'm not sure that it helps us kind of reflect on what it might be that we want to oppose or revolt against. Or For me, evolution would be a much more appropriate term in terms of what we're talking about and in terms of thinking about the future. I think we kind of revolted enough, if indeed at all, and I haven't really seen the outcomes of that. So I'd be more interested to think about evolution, and particularly in relation to Paul and Dan's work as well.
Just to add to that, I would say if we're revolting against something, maybe we're revolting against the analogue world, and the analogue world hasn't totally been consumed by digital yet, so maybe the revolution word is still appropriate. But.
Okay, that could be an interesting discussion, because I think we're revolting against the analogue word, but also we're revolting against the digital word, which is why Rich Romania is happening, and which is why old formats and technologies are becoming so kind of desirable and embraced today. So, yeah, interesting.
Yes, of course,
Nika McDonald, I'm going to be speaking at the end. For me, I think the term, and I think, Maria, you said that this is the third industrial revolution, and I think we have to be a little bit careful about using these terms, because a revolution in the means of production, for want of a better term, from hunting to agriculture, and then agriculture to broadly manufacturing, is a social and an economic thing, as well as being something that has a technological basis. So I think we need to be a bit careful, and I think the digital revolution show at the Barbican, which I'm going to talk about a bit, took that trope and in a way, it's a bit like sort of Marlon Brando in The Wild One. It's like, we've got a revolution, what are you against? And, we say, what have you got? And the digital revolution is against everything that we don't like. It's against marketing and big companies. It's against big politics and governments. It's against, the hierarchy, or, our parents, or, our kids against us, in my case, and Jim's, I believe. So, it's just, it's only two, yes.
I was actually saying it's claimed us.
Right.
Rather than claiming that it is, but maybe I wasn't clear, sorry.
I think we've just got to be a bit careful about how we use these terms, because actually the public, the people that we're broadly interested in, if we oversell something, as we often do in this area, will quickly see through what we're offering and think that we're charlatans, and we need to put things, tell things as they are, if you like.
I was interested also by this idea of, the breaking of rules that you mentioned before, and if this is if we're talking about like a revolution in terms of like breaking the rules, but also if I was wondering, I was thinking about accessibility, access to tools, and if that's how the earlier digital pioneers, let's say, were able to do that, to kind of use the computer medium in a completely different way, in a kind of reverse what, just to take it to where they want it. And if I don't know if now this is a bit more easier to do, or if we have if it's happening in a different or more accessible way because of these tools that we have at our hands. So I was thinking about maybe these kind of revolution in one side, and then breaking the rules, and if there's any kind of...
Well, I hope people are still doing it. Like, one of the great things about Danny's site, Noodlebox, we took the CD-ROM authoring tool and made a website out of it, and it was a website where you could, didn't have the traditional menu system. You could create your own navigation system. So Danny was kind of making it do something that it wasn't supposed to do. And I certainly hope people are still doing that. I assume they are. That's what kids do, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's a subversive process rather than a revolutionary one, though.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking, like in terms of like the idea of revolution as more of like a subversion, or changing the rules, or hacking the rules, right? Rather than an actual revolution. Which that was my kind of first question, that I thought, okay, what do we mean by digital revolution anyway? So, but if there's no more questions, we can move on to Alex's, and then we can come back to this later.
So, when Irini mentioned about sort of what's next for the sort of digital revolution, the first thing I could have talked about some sort of future technology, but there's a real issue with digital, and especially with digital art, and that's preservation. We're creating things at great speed, but we don't necessarily have the means to preserve them beyond, especially in the case of digital, a few years. Obviously, in terms of preservation of art, traditional art, paintings, sculpture, other mediums, we've through a great deal of luck, to be honest. I mean, the fact that the Mona Lisa is still with us after 500 years is quite remarkable, and the fact that there's been wars and fire and all these things. The fact that we've got so much of these things is mainly down to sort of choice of material, and digital work is really transitory. I mean, it's it's so easy to just like turn off the signal, turn off the power, turn off the these things that keep the data sort of intact and useful. So when we talk about like a piece of software, like an artwork, it's just at the top of the pile. It's sitting on top of a whole operating system. It's sitting on top of other libraries and the hardware that it's running on. And if it's an interactive piece, then you've got to have some sort of input sensor, cameras or whatever. That's got a whole sort of ecosystem to itself as well. So you have to take it as a whole ecosystem if you want to sort of look at preserving it. Microsoft, Apple, Dell, all these big companies, they're not interested in making products that last. They don't want to sell you a computer that's going to last for your life, because they would quickly go out of business. So, we're actually sort of fighting against them. We're not, they're not helping us. And we're living it's developed into this sort of one-way upgrade culture, where your phone's updating all the time, your computer's updating all the time, and it brings changes, and things don't remain the same, and it's often quite difficult to sort of go back to where you were before. And obviously hardware's changing. We've currently got the current paradigms, and we're sort of really sort of pushing against the limits of what it can do. We might have some quantum computing thing or some brand new paradigm that we'll all end up using in the future that isn't compatible with the stuff that we've got now. So I have a sort of there's a way to upset programmers, and if you meet programmers at parties, this is good fun. You ask them to write a non-trivial program, so not just like a 2-line sort of thing, that will still be able to work as intended in 100 or even 1,000 years' time. And there's a sort of slow fear that sort of forms over their face, because programmers love problems and solving problems, and it's a really difficult one. But I mean, this is a problem of art. If the Mona Lisa can survive for 500 years, this is what we need for digital art too. So just to give you an idea of some of the problems. This is a piece that I did. That was an interactive piece. I started developing in like 2009, and it's very sort of simple in its process, where it looks for people and it takes the outline of the person. And if you, it was sort of railing against interactive pieces where you wave your hands around. So it sort of rewarded you for standing still. If you moved, it didn't do anything. And if you stand still, then it's like a sort of stencil and the sort of paint drips and everything. And I've exhibited this a lot, and I've had to update it and change it, because I used to use infrared cameras, and now I can use the Kinect, because the Kinect's brilliant at picking out people and stuff. So, but it doesn't, even though that hardware has changed, it hasn't changed the fundamental, presentation or method of the artwork. I do artworks with robotics, and robots are wonderful things. We exhibited this is with Anna Dimitri. We exhibited this in Watermans in the foyer upstairs, and it ran for like a good sort of 6 weeks before its head just started doing this furiously because one of the motors went. And it's these mechanical things are just, they're not designed to last. They're not designed to operate, especially how, if you get artists sort of trying to do weird things with them, they don't like it very much. So the idea of robotic art is something that needs to be, preserved but thought about in sort of a completely different way. And I've done sort of performances with sort of video mapping and which I think is how a lot of digital art's actually taken as basically as a performance. Because if you see an installation and it doesn't work in 5 years' time, then and you can only reference the documentation, then that's kind of a performance. It's in a sort of traditional sense. So there are, the good news is obviously there are lots of large institutions who are developing sort of top-down strategies for preserving all digital stuff, whether it's archiving, data from hard drives. Because if you leave a hard drive for long enough, you get bit rot, and the data, it loses its magnetic charge, and the data will actually literally rot off the thing. But because they're sort of top-down things, they will sort of obviously directly benefit famous artists before the sort of us hoi polloi. Or if you choose a sort of durable medium. If you generate a piece of digital art and render it out to a video, that's sort of circumventing a lot of problems. But digital artists are really sort of pushing the boundaries of what you can do with computers. They're turning stuff around a lot faster than, say, games companies. They want to play with technology and really get into the crevices and really sort of find out what we can do with it and how we relate to it. And that should not be limited in any way. So, but if in terms of preserving this, who is responsible? It's a big responsibility to take. So there's, obviously there's been an enormous movement, the maker movement, which has been sort of swept across the world and has just encouraged people to, learn to solder and make electronics and learn programming and just all sorts of things. But I think we need like a keeper movement. That we have this idea that these things are just not entirely sort of transitory things, that we want to preserve them for sort of future generations. So in terms of what artists can do, you can select for preservation. You can use software that can be emulated easily. Jim, you mentioned that you had a ZX Spectrum, and you can get a ZX Spectrum emulator on a PC now. You can run all the old games and all the rest of it. If you write your art on systems that can be emulated, you're sort of increasing your chance of having sort of a preserved version of it. You can abstract the hardware, which basically means that you don't rely on any particular bit of hardware. You sort of say, well, it's a camera that sort of has this resolution and sort of does this function. I need that for my artwork, but you don't have to say it's a Kinect. It might be a Kinect 2 or a Kinect 5 or whatever. You can sort of abstract that in that way. Documentation, which personally I hate doing, but it needs to be done. And again, available source code and assets and things, the nuts and bolts of the stuff that you need to make it actually work, if somebody sort of got around to sort of looking at it. So it's a lot to think about. Making art is difficult enough in itself. Programming is sort of difficult enough in itself. So adding this sort of whole extra layer of stuff is almost sort of numbing to the brain. So I'm trying to help. I've written this new piece of software which I've been sort of planning for about 15 years, and I've been working on it for about the past sort of 14 months. And it's the idea is that it sort of abstracts programming. So you can learn programming, but you don't write any code. And it's got digital preservation built in. So if you've got a Connect, that's just like a box up here, and if you upgrade to a Connect 2, you just take that box away and put the new box in, and the rest of the artwork will still keep running. And it's I mean, I'm always happy to be on same panel with Frieda Nacker, because he always gives me a good thing to disagree with. Because I think that you have to use the language of technology. I think, to hide behind the idea of sort of saying, well, we're going to take an image and put it on a screen. I mean, there's lots of steps that need to be taken to do that. And if we hide it, and then we can't explore it, we can't explore and understand it. So I think, people get turned off by writing actual code, but they're not stupid. They can understand the processes behind it. So I'm trying to sort of put all of this stuff into this kind of software, and really sort of, so I'm writing all of my art is now on this, and this is my life's work now. This is, I'm sort of trying to do this. And so next week at the Eden Project in Cornwall, there's opening of an exhibition where I've actually got an artwork again done with Anna, which is an interactive piece, as a permanent installation. So this is really putting my money where my mouth is. If it fails, then hands up. But I'm hoping that this will really be a viable platform for preserving digital art, for a long time into the future. So that's some websites for further information. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Nika McDonald. I'm a slight outsider here in a way, in that I don't work in the area of curation, preservation. I'm not an academic who focuses on digital art, but I have been involved in the digital industries since the mid-80s. I think Jim showed a Macintosh 2. Danny showed a Macintosh 2, and I started on a Macintosh SE30, which Jim won't put in the digital archaeology collection because it's too old. And I've been working with designers and creatives as a technologist and consultant for that period, but also trying to help develop a narrative and an understanding around what design and creativity are in digital media, and help people who are very talented working in the media they work in, which is both time-based media, but particularly print media, to realize their creativity and their potential in new ways. And I also wrote one of the first books about design for interaction and the web, and hosted a forum called Experience Design, which we did with the Design Council, which in the first half of the noughties was a sort of a crucible for people really trying to understand what was going on in digital media, engaging with new platforms, with interaction, with creativity. We featured processing, which people might know, which John Mader and Ben Fry and Casey Rees have been involved in creating in its early days, but also a lot of work exploring things that still concern us, like how do we create interfaces which are usable, desirable, delightful, and work for ordinary people to do the many things that we might want to do in this revolution, if it is such. I wanted to, thinking about the future, I wanted to pick up on some bigger themes, one of which is the role of art in society, the second of which is to ask about whether this is a new medium that we're engaging with, or a new media, and look at the question of intelligence and creativity, which has been discussed, obviously, particularly by Paul and Daniel, and then the question of subjectivity and how we connect with the public, and then lastly to look at the role of design and its relationship to art. So I realize none of the questions I'm asking are necessarily new. I just, in a way, feel they need to be restated, at least from the way that I understand these discussions. And I think if we're talking about art, we need to have a view about what art is. Now, that should and will never be resolved. But some of the things that people have claimed art is historically, which I subscribe to, is a way of understanding the human condition. And at a period of change that we live in, that's more important than ever. Helping people to understand their lives and reflect on their existence. Helping people to see things in new ways, and trying to help people understand the nature of things. And if we frame our thinking about these discussions in some understanding of art, which we have some agreement about, it might help us put things in context. And in that question, I do, in the kind of scope of work that we're looking at, how much would we honestly say the work we engage with in digital art, and clearly that's a meaningless concept, or even computer art. I say that with the Computer Art Society as sponsors of this event, that has had those kind of effects on us, those kind of effects on society. If you look historically at the role of art, there was an exhibition at the V&A, I imagine a number of people here might have seen, on theatre design in the early Soviet era in Russia. And the quality and scope and ambition of the work that was going on there, and then knowing the kind of transformative effect the revolution had in Russia, and I use that word revolution advisedly, and the role of art as a social process, if you like, it really puts in perspective the potential of art in society. Now, clearly, that effect has been seen in many other times in society. Second question I wanted to look at is whether we're dealing with a new media or a new medium. And I say this as somebody who's been involved in the media side of this new medium for 20 plus years. And I'd say in some ways we've invented a new medium which can present old media. I sometimes use the term old wine in new bottles. But have we actually created new forms of publishing, broadcasting, or whatever term you might want to use? And we could ask the same question in art. If we look at computer games, which we've alluded to quite a lot today, I would say we have created a new media, not just a new medium for playing old games, if you like. And in computer art, if we're going to use that term, there clearly is work which would qualify as art, but couldn't be reproduced in any old medium, a previous medium. On the other hand, much of the work that we look at, and everything we've seen on screen today pretty much has been static, could be presented in an old medium. So we have to ask how much, if you like, the experience of what we're interested in ends up being experienced in old ways. And it's great that people can experience things more widely through a medium which is global and the most profound medium we've ever created. But we've got to recognise that perhaps it is old wine in new bottles to some extent. On the question of artificial intelligence and creativity, and I imagine this might ruffle a few feathers, the idea of generative art is clearly not new. The last time it came around, in my experience, was when I was asked to write an article about it for Blueprint in 2001, I think. But clearly the potential for creating generative art has increased massively. And there's a great preoccupation now, particularly with the rise of the network and increasing computational power and big data, to use that terrible term, to imagine that computer power, is going to overwhelm us, is going to create a new form of life, if you like. And I'm very wary about this because I think it was it Danny quoted the Turing test earlier on. I think that argument represents an underestimation of what human creativity and intelligence is, and an overestimation of what computing has achieved. And anyone who's used Siri or Google Voice and so on will know how incredibly stupid something can feel that has been worked on by some of the greatest minds on the planet for many years. So even if we could create artificial intelligence, we're a long way from it. But I would argue that anything which is generative ultimately has to be judged by someone who is human. Humans are the sort of subject, if you like, of art, and the idea that a computer could be creative or computing could be creative doesn't make sense to me, because it puts people second, if you like, or relegates the human from judgment. And ultimately, anything that's generative in computational sense has been created by somebody, so the creativity is in the creation of that thing. Now, people have argued with me, and I think it's an argument that needs to be worked out, that we could create a intelligence which is self-replicating, self-improving, and so on. I'm still skeptical about that. But I think it reflects the sort of broader tendency in society to see technology as having agency, i.e. the power to create change and actually creating change, and to see humans, us, as being, the object, if you like. We are the people to which things are done. And I think that's a profoundly depressing view of humanity, and it doesn't tally with how I understand human progress to have taken place. Clearly, technology is critical, but it's a subservient thing, just as it is in creativity. I think on the question of the public, and I alluded to that in the discussion we had after Maria and Jim's talks, as people involved in art, we must be interested in connecting with the public, and not in a kind of instrumental way, which I think is a huge danger that we've seen in the arts in the last 15 or 20 years. But clearly the public appears to be interested in art if you look at the figures for visiting galleries, if you look at the figures for visiting museums, if you look at what's considered to be culturally desirable these days. But I think we have to be a little bit careful and recognise that there's different things going on there. That galleries have become places, destinations that people don't necessarily go to engage with what's there, but to be seen to be there, or because they are lovely places to be. They've got a sort of, there's a bad faith, if you like, about the way in which the engagement with art and culture and so on is presented. And I think we've got to look at the way in which our work is presented in the public. And to be honest, it's very little and not well enough. And the Barbican Digital Revolution show, apart from the first half, is often regarded as being a bit of a smorgasbord and an aural assault, something which has no narrative, something which didn't put work in any kind of proper context. And it was hugely ambitious, and I live in the City of London, and my council tax goes towards it, and I'm glad it did. But I think we need to be quite critical about the way in which this kind of work is presented. We can go all the way back to cybernetic serendipity, which was reprised in a exhibition at the Fox Reading Room at the ICA, which, to Alex's point about things becoming a performance, or maybe it was Maria's point about things becoming a performance, it was a very well performed reproduction of cybernetic serendipity. But we've got the Web Wizards show, which some people might remember, which Danny's work was featured in at the Design Museum. Decode, we've mentioned, I think, earlier on, I think Danny mentioned that, which was actually a very exciting show in many ways. The Power to Create, which was also at the V&A that Daniel Charney presented, which dealt with some of these subjects, I thought was very good in many ways. And I think Kinetico, which many people will be familiar with, which Alex has presented at or shown at, is an example of these things done well, but it's not done nearly well enough. And I think if you look online, there are spaces like The Space, which is an Arts Council BBC collaboration, in the public sphere, Show Studio, which I consulted on in the early years, and Danny was an advisor on for many years, which do a very interesting job of trying to present digital creativity and art and experiences, but have a sort of strange problem of never really bringing people together and never really having a sort of temporal element to them, such that you feel you have to go and see or experience something at a certain point, or allowing you to discuss with your friends, family, colleagues, the work that's being shown. And that finally, on the public, I'd like to ask, we sort of alluded to this in the last discussion. We have access to these kind of tools that are so rich and wonderful, and yet do we feel there is greater creativity among ordinary people. I mean, I think about my kids. They love digital products. They love consuming them. I find it much more difficult to get them to create, even in the age of the maker and in the age of, programming languages like Scratch, which are designed for, kids to learn how to program and so on. And I wonder why it is, when we have so much access to these creative tools, that we're not seeing, or maybe we are and I'm just missing it, a greater rise in creativity. And I'm not going to reflect on the design side of things because I've run out of time, but I will note John Mader, who's many people will know, who started life at MIT and is now, can you believe it, a venture capitalist working for Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield and Byers in Sand Hill Row in California. But he, many people will be familiar with his work. Tight Wright was shown at the Digital Revolution show, for instance. And he investigated what the sort of materiality of digital media was, and very much pushed back against the tools that were created, not because they were bad tools, but because often they were presented as things which could enable creativity, where he believed you needed to be able to, get to the sort of the machine code, if you like, to be able to be truly creative, which is partly why he led the creation of processing when he wrote Design by Numbers. And I wonder if there's something about that we're not presenting tools to people at the right kind of level. They're too kind of constrained, they're too framed, if you like, to allow for real creativity by ordinary people. Or maybe that's too much to expect. Maybe the division of labour would always be the creatives and the consumers, and disaggregation, that famous term from the early years of the web, never really happens. Everyone retains their skills and doesn't become... Well, I was going to actually argue against multidisciplinarity, but I'll come back to that one. So thank you for your time listening.
Yeah, I think education is also another thing that I wanted to mention before as well, because and we heard from Paul that one great thing that happened was to drop out of university, and that's another thing that I've been wondering about, how much has, how much of what has happened since the 60s has driven like change in education, and what, how much is going to change in the future, and how much, of the, let's say, the current and the future, if I can say again, revolutions will, make things like different. But I just wanted to ask also if there are any questions for Alex and Nico after their presentation
as well.
Yes, or disagreements, or yeah, please feel free to. Okay, yeah, we've got one down there. It's at the back there.
Can I get some more water?
Yeah, of course.
I guess it's to Alex really, and a couple of observations, I guess. First is that these issues of preservation are not just limited to digital works. You see it in dance, for example, where even though you can notate dance after a fashion and you can video it, that's not the same as preserving kind of the internal structures and the choreographic rules of it. So this idea of being able to preserve happens in the the conventional arts as well. So that's point one. Point two, one of the many metaphors I use when teaching software, teaching coding, is that software is kind of like gardening. You're building something that can kind of grow in a sense, and you can't expect it to kind of last forever, because the whole process, whole ecosystem is one of kind of decay and regrowth. And you wouldn't expect to build something for the Chelsea Flower Show that would last for 10 years. So software is kind of the same thing. You're building something that needs to be kind of constantly energized, and you're fighting against entropy. And my comment on that, I guess, is that one of our issues is that institutions that commission software works generally don't understand that. They think they're paying for a thing, and once they pay for it, they've got the thing and they're good to go. And in fact, they should be thinking of it as a process, and they're paying for a thing that they've got to preserve, like a garden.
No, I think the on the first point, not all art can be preserved. There are still performances. It depends on the intention of the artist to a great extent. If I create or like a lot of Paul's work, it's a screen-based piece. It's sort of a self-contained thing. It would be lovely to see that in 100 years' time, or so that's it's a question of that works in a sort of that sort of form. Something involving dance, can be reenacted, but it's obviously never going to be the same as that original performance. I mean, I'm not saying we must preserve every bite of everything but I think we're not preserving enough, and I think artists don't have the option to preserve enough, and it is partly because of this shifting trend. I mean, the garden's a very good metaphor. The weeds are constantly trying to take over, but the idea of who's the gardener? Should it, if and I'm sure you've done this, you've written a piece of art and you want to show it a few years later, and oh God, you've upgraded everything and you need to spend several days, putting it back together. That's your stuff. I mean, and it happens to me too, so the idea of like every artist having to do that seems kind of an enormous waste of effort and time. And if we could build this sort of stuff into the tools that we use, because it's not currently, we can at least help, and we can at least make provision for the idea of preservation, which isn't in our digital culture at the moment.
I've just got an observation on preserving dance. I saw this, I think it was a Malaysian-based artist, and what he was doing, he was videoing dance. And then he was getting the performance, and when he showed the performance, there was a wireframe model in some software that he'd written that would show which muscle groups were moving as the dancer performed. And then he would rig up a kind of an outfit with electrodes in it to a dancer, and that dancer would then stand on stage and they'd play the video, and as the muscle groups were moved on the wireframe model in the software, little electric shocks would make the dancer move in an approximation of the dance. And it wasn't perfect, but it was very funny. And it looked like it had potential. You could see there was something in it. Yeah.
I think we need to bear in mind that we only realise what's been, we think things have been preserved in other art forms or other media because we see them, but what we don't recognise is how much is lost. And for every Mona Lisa, which was cited by Alex, there may be tens or hundreds of works equally good which weren't preserved. On the other hand, whose judgment was it that something was a good work to start with? How much undiscovered wonderful work is that we're too scared to say is good, because no one else has said it first, which is sort of under our noses. So I think we need to be a bit careful about always wanting to preserve, and maybe there's things to be discovered which are already there. And there is, to Maria's point, there's also a nostalgic element about preservation, which is not always the most healthy.
But I think, if anything, the maker culture has sort of shown us that we are quite capable of making the decision. If I want to preserve my work, I can choose to do that. It shouldn't be down necessarily to someone else to make that judgment call.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't want to preserve your work, you'd worry about. I guess I'm just saying. There is a sort of cultural anxiety, if you like, sometimes expressed here, which is, maybe inappropriate. And is the Mona Lisa really preserved? If you want to see it, you have to queue for 3 hours and, watch it, look at it behind a thick glass screen in the Louvre. I mean, is that, is it really there? I don't mean is it a fake, but sound like Dan Brown. But what does it mean for it to be preserved, even if it appears to be preserved?
Also, just on that, because it's now under, as well as the thick glass, it's also under one of the most advanced lighting systems that have ever been developed, which keeps it completely static in terms of changes of light, which is obviously not how it would ever have been seen 500 years ago. You would have seen it by candlelight or daylight, or and is that not the artist's intention? The idea that it's actually out of time now, protected and in this illumination that never changes minute to minute. It literally is preserved in a timeless state, So it's an interesting sort of example of it.
You mentioned erasure or forgetting. And I just remembered, I don't know if you're familiar with Igor Stromacher.
Yep.
He's a net artist whose project now is to erase all his past work. So he's very methodically been destroying every piece that he's made the last 20 years.
It's not always easy.
Or so, yeah, I think about 20 years. So that's interesting. But also because you mentioned live performance, and my background is in performance, I think it's interesting to acknowledge, I think they share a lot of commonalities, new media arts or digital arts and performance, because of some sense of ephemerality in their nature. But at the same time, when it comes to live performance, sometimes it's very much artists are keen for it to be forgotten or for it to be remembered via word of mouth or in different ways, and kind of this sense of liveness and the experience you get at the moment that cannot be preserved or repeated is very much kind of part of an inherent characteristic of live performance. It's a core trait, kind of an ontological trait. And I think that could be interesting again when we're thinking about preserving digital or media arts, but how much of it is about allowing for obsolescence and forgetting and erasure, how much of it is about kind of preserving.
Yeah, I think on this idea of like the artist's decision, and I think, Jim, I think you mentioned you do refer to that in your essay that you contributed for our catalogue and on Pike, and I think. If you can, I hope I'm not wrong. Yeah, you did.
It's something that Alex mentioned about with this artwork. He kind of changes it every time, and if artists do change it every time, kind of what constitutes the original piece? What piece should we preserve?
And who makes the decision?
And who makes the decision? Because I know artists change their minds. I know when I was speaking to Paul, he said originally he wasn't worried about preserving his work. He liked the ephemerality of it, and now he's changed his mind. Yeah.
We've got. Yeah,
I just wanted to sort of suggest that perhaps this focus on preservation is an illustration of the conservative nature, maybe, of the society that we're living in on many levels. And it's sort of occurred to me a lot that, Jim, some conversations we've had recently have been more about migration. Maybe that word's not allowed into the discourse anymore, but maybe if we do shift a little bit from preservation to migration, there are a lot of other ways in which you can address the notion of the generative or the art that grows or changes or whatever or evolves. So, Jim, I just wanted to maybe put you on the spot to talk a little bit about that, because I think your thinking around that's really interesting and maybe it deserves to be aired on the panels.
Well, I mean, ideally, I'd like it all preserved, in the original context and the original state. And when the era I'm particularly interested in is the first generation of websites, like 91 to 2005. And it is realistic, I think, to at the moment, to preserve the original hardware and the software and the operating systems and the code and the input and out devices in that original state. If you go back, to the 70s, it's not possible. There's no way that Paul was going to get a DG mini computer, upstairs. And build a reader on it. And in fact, I think it was only ever shown at the Slade before because of the scale and size of the machine. So I think there's some practical constraints. And I mean, ideally, it would be in the context of the original stuff. But if you can emulate it, then it's better than nothing. And if you can emulate it in the original kind of box or original hardware, the original input and output devices, then I think that's a decent compromise.
Just to follow on from that point, I think one of the problems with the conservation of digital artwork has been general purpose computers. People use the computer not just for a single artwork, they use it's their laptop or it's a computer they want to reuse. We're now at the point where computers are cheap enough and screens are cheap enough that the artwork can become an object. You can have a digital art object, the computer, the screen, everything is embedded in a single unit. I think that will lead to artworks or digital artworks being preserved much better. Now, of course, the computers can break and the screens can break, but we now have things that can last over time rather than just programs and things that are running on a computer. So I think there is about to be a big change, actually. I think we will see digital art things, digital art objects, having a much longer life than maybe some of the older digital artworks.
Do you want to?
No, an unrelated remark.
Okay. So. There's a reader has a question here.
I don't believe this.
The Macintosh breaks down after 2 years, and you cannot repair it anymore. And this is quality control. Things do survive that were made in the 1960s, but they were not really digital works. So digital works are made not to be preserved, I believe. They are not to be preserved. They are in a state of fluidity, and this part of history does not exist. History happens when it is written. No, it's always looking back, never in advance. No, so the idea that the artist is now preserving his work is wrong, is basically wrong, I believe. She should not be thinking of preserving it, because society is doing this. The artist is producing a work, and to the extent that its existence is based on digital technology, it is made to be passed over. It's happening. It is performance. It's not made for any longer time. I think this has gone, and the only problem is that we do understand things only if there is history. So maybe that's the problem, no? That we lose our history by the technology. The technology does not allow history to happen anymore. That's the epitome of capitalism, really.
It's always very nice to see you, Frida. Because I think we're turning round these kind of power structures of the people in a certain position can dictate which artworks we'll take forward and the ones we leave behind. I think we're past that. I think, with the maker movement, with the changes in music production and, the breakdown of these industries, we have to seize control. I think the artists, we have the tools, we build the tools, and we have the power. So I don't subscribe to the idea.
So we build a party.
You're fantastic, but I really think that because digital stuff doesn't necessarily get the exposure that other art forms get. I mean, you guys are you're well known, but you're probably not as well known as even bigger artists, and I think that's a shame. I think all of this stuff needs to be Well, it's because I think there's the fact that digital art is still a new media, and video art still struggling to get acceptance as a fully fledged member of the art medium club. So I think I'm making a few claims now, but so I think it's for us to have the power. It's for us to take it and to explore it and to not have the limitations of those kind of power structures anymore.
Does it have to be either or? Can we not kind of consider the possibility that maybe digital art has a dual ontology, that it is an object and it also is a performance, and it kind of lives within this dual.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, we can leave it there then. we will have to close because we are running a bit out of time. But thank you all very much for sharing your ideas and thoughts. And thank you.